Persian Empire. The Persians, who declared their independence by destroying the Median Empire in 550 BC, expanded their borders in a short time and became a great empire. Its territory expanded to the shores of the Caspian Sea and India. They then marched into Anatolia, destroyed the Lydian kingdom, and conquered all the lands in the west up to the Aegean coast and Thrace. They then conquered the Babylonian Empire and later Egypt and advanced as far as Carthage in North Africa. During this period of rapid expansion, the peoples of the lands under the control of the Persian Empire tended to revolt. The Greek city-states of Athens and Eretria had militarily supported the Ionian revolt in 499 BC. Darius I, the Persian ruler, took action against Athens and Eretria as a punishment, while also seeing it as an opportunity to expand his empire into Europe. To fulfill this ambition, General Mardonius led an army into Thrace in 492 BC. The aim of this campaign was to recapture the Thracian tribes that had gotten out of control during the Ionian revolt, to annex the kingdom of Macedonia to the Persian Empire, and to punish Eretria and Athens for supporting the Ionian revolt. Soon after, Thrace was brought back under the control of the Persian Empire, while Alexander I's kingdom of Macedonia was transformed into a vassal state subject to the Persian court. The Persian army and navy under General Artaphernes then launched a direct attack on Greece. After occupying Eretria in a short time, the Persian army marched directly to Athens. However, they were defeated by the Athenians at the Battle of Marathon and retreated. Darius was enraged by this defeat and vowed revenge, but he did not live long enough to take his revenge. Xerxes I, who ascended the throne after Darius's death, had the sole purpose of fulfilling his father's vow and conquering ancient Greece completely. The desire for revenge had been passed down from father to son. The Athenians, on the other hand, knew very well that the Persians would be at their gates with all their might, so they began preparations against the Persian attack. The Athenians needed a strong navy to fight the Persians, so the Athenians started to build a strong navy. Athens also did not have enough land troops to fight, so they tried to make alliances with other Greek city-states. Meanwhile, the Persian Emperor Xerxes I sent envoys to the Greek city-states in 481 BC, asking them to submit to him. Most of the Greek kingdoms were afraid to confront the Persians, but the actions of Athens and Sparta, the most powerful of the Greek city-states, were enough to spark a war. In Athens, the Persian envoys were thrown into a pit. In Sparta, the Persian envoy was thrown into a well. The ancient Greeks had reached a point from which there was no going back. The revenge of the Persian Emperor Xerxes was getting bigger and bigger. The outcome was an alliance forged between Athens and Sparta that brought them together. Other Greek city-states joined this alliance. This unification was a remarkable development in the divided Greek world. The Persian army, the most powerful army of the period, soon crossed the Dardanelles and entered European territory. Time was running out for the Greeks. The Athenian general Themistocles then proposed a different strategy. The only line through which the Persian army could march into southern Greece was the Thermopylae Pass, a narrow pass between the steep mountains and the sea. This pass was easily defensible by the hoplites, even though they were far outnumbered by the Persian army. At the same time, he proposed that the Greek allied fleet should be stationed in the strait next to the pass to prevent the Persian fleet from crossing the Thermopylae Pass by sea and landing troops in the rear. The Greek Congress approved this dual strategy. Meanwhile, having crossed Thrace, the Persian army was moving unhurriedly through Macedonia. In August, spies reported that the army was heading for the Greek mainland and was approaching. However, this time of the year was the time when Sparta, the de facto military leader of the Greek alliance, was celebrating the festival of Carneia in honor of Apollo. According to Spartan law, any military activity was forbidden during the Carneia festival. Going to war would therefore be sacrilege for the Spartan army. In this situation, the Ephors decided to send Leonidas, one of the two co-kings, with 300 guards to the Thermopylae Pass to stop the advance of the Persian army. Leonidas would delay the advance of the Persian army at the pass, and the entire Spartan army would move to Thermopylae when the Carneia festival was over. According to the historian Herodotus, the Battle of Thermopylae began when the Spartans consulted the oracles of Delphi the previous year. The oracles told them that either their city would be sacked by the Persians or they would mourn the loss of a king. Herodotus tells us that King Leonidas, knowing that his forces were insufficient to win a victory, believed the prophecy and thus saw his own death as inevitable and willingly went to his death for the sake of Sparta. Leonidas and his 300 royal guards were joined by volunteer soldiers from the Greek alliance forces, giving Leonidas a force of around 7,000 men. At the head of his army, Leonidas marched to the Thermopylae Pass, where he waited for the Persian forces. In mid-August, the great Persian army was seen advancing towards Thermopylae. Historians of the period exaggerate the number of the great Persian army under Xerxes' command. This is because the primary sources are exclusively Greek. Unfortunately, none of the works of Persian historians of the period have survived. Of the surviving sources, Herodotus puts the number of the Persian army at 2 million, while Simonides, a contemporary, puts it at 4 million. Modern historians, on the other hand, tend to regard these figures given by ancient writers, including Herodotus, as exaggerations intended to glorify the Greek victory, and accept that the Persian army numbered at least 70,000 and at most 300,000. Whatever the exact figure, it is undisputed that the Persians were the largest army of the time, at least 10 times the size of the Greek army. When the Persians finally reached the Thermopylae Pass, they found 7,000 Greek soldiers lined up against them like a wall. Leonidas and 300 Spartan guards were in the front ranks, with the other Greek soldiers in the rear. Leonidas's army had the sea on its right and the mountains on its left. Tactically, the pass of Thermopylae was a perfect position for the Greek style of warfare. For the hobbits, who fought in phalanx formation, defending a narrow pass was a very convenient way of fighting, as there was no risk of being flanked by cavalry. It was also more difficult for the Persian infantry, carrying lighter weapons and armor, to attack the phalanx in a pass. King Xerxes of Persia sent envoys to King Leonidas, asking him to surrender and lay down his arms. Leonidas then said his famous words to the envoys, "Come and take it." Another known reaction came from one of Leonidas's generals. When Leonidas refused the envoy's requests, the envoy said that Persian arrows covered the sun to show the strength of the Persian army. The general's response was, "Then we'll fight in the shade." With the Persian envoys returning empty-handed, war was inevitable. Xerxes then ordered his army to attack. The first attack was made by archers. Thousands of Persian archers began to rain arrows at the same time on Leonidas's army, holding the 15-meter pass. However, the arrows that bounced off the bronze shields and togas of the Greeks did not cause any serious damage to the warriors. After the arrow attack, Xerxes led 10,000 Median and Khuzestan warriors against the Greek lines. It seems that Xerxes had decided to launch the first attack, using his most skillful soldiers to counter the Persian core military force, which consisted mainly of Medes. These forces launched a frontal assault in waves. The Greeks met the Persian army at the narrowest part of the pass. The Spartans, positioned at the front, created a formidable line of defense with their extended spears and sizable shields. The fact that most of the Persian soldiers were not wearing armor was a weakness. The straw shields they used were inadequate against the Greek swords and spears. In addition, Persian spears were shorter than Greek spears, which was another weakness. Under these conditions, many Persian soldiers were killed before they could even get close enough to swing a sword at the Spartans. Persian superiority in numbers was of no use against the long spears of the Greeks. The Persian losses were so heavy that Xerxes rose 3 times in anger from his throne, where he had been watching the battle. After an entire day of fighting, the efforts of the Persian attacks proved to be futile with only a small number of survivors. The Spartan casualties were only a few. After the heavy losses suffered by the Persian army, Xerxes assembled an offensive force of 10,000 of his most elite troops, the Immortals, the Persian palace guards, and ordered them to break through the Spartan shields. The Immortals were an elite group trained from an early age to engage solely in warfare and combat scenarios. The palace guards of Leonidas and the palace guards of Xerxes faced each other at this crossing. The Immortals fought with determination, as fierce as the Spartans. However, the Immortals suffered heavy casualties due to the Spartans' extensive use of long spears and shields. But they still managed to break the Spartan line in the afternoon with partial success. Breaking the line, the Immortals clashed with the Greek allied forces in the rear, inflicting heavy casualties on the Greeks. It was a fierce battle at Thermopylae that day. But there was no decisive outcome, and the Immortals failed to open the pass. In total, the Persians lost 20,000 men in these 2 days of fighting. According to Herodotus, Xerxes realized that the combat power of his troops was insufficient and withdrew them to camps. The withdrawal of the troops to the camps could be considered as a sign that Xerxes was undecided about what strategy to follow. But in the meantime, an unexpected development occurred. A man named Ephialtes, who lived on the shores of the Gulf of Malian, he brought information to the Persian camp that there was a mountain pass that allowed travel around the outside of the Thermopylae Pass. It was after this incident that the name Ephialtes came to be used in Greek for treachery. That night, Xerxes mobilized a contingent of Immortals to cross this mountain path and surround the Spartan forces. The path that this force was to march on ran along the ridges, across the cliffs of Mount Anopeia, and around the pass of Thermopylae. According to Herodotus, the number of Immortals crossing the path was 20,000. In fact, Leonidas knew of the existence of such a pass and had stationed a 1,000-strong Phocidian picket at its head. At first, however, the Phocidian guards failed to spot the Persians because the mountain was covered with oak trees. When they finally realized that the Immortals were passing through the passes, they sounded the alarm. 1,000 Phocidian soldiers could not possibly stop a force of 20,000 Immortals, so they retreated quickly. What Leonidas had feared had happened. The Persians had the Greeks pinned down on both sides at the Thermopylae Pass. So many of the Greeks boarded ships and withdrew from the battle. But Leonidas and the 300 Spartan guards decided to sacrifice their own lives to ensure the safety and honor of Sparta. Encouraged by the Spartans, some Greeks stayed on the battlefield with them. Thus, the number of those who stayed with the Spartans was 1,400. King Xerxes of Persia waited until midday and then gave the order to attack. The Persian armies attacked from two sides. This time, Leonidas and his men pushed forward and climbed to the wider part of the pass. They made a last stand against the Persian army with spears until their spears broke and then with swords. It is rumored that Xerxes and his two brothers were killed by the Spartans during this battle. During the peak of the battle, Leonidas was struck by Persian arrows and collapsed to the ground. In the aftermath, the soldiers engaged in intense combat amidst the fallen bodies. A fierce brawl unfolded in the vicinity of Leonidas's lifeless remains. It was a battle of slaughter. All of Leonidas and his troops perished in this mountain pass, bringing down over 20,000 soldiers from Persia with them to their graves. When King Leonidas's body was found on the battlefield by the Persians, Xerxes took his revenge on Leonidas's lifeless body. He beheaded Leonidas and nailed his body to a cross. So the Persians went through the Thermopylae Pass and ravaged all the way to Athens. The resistance of Leonidas and his army at Thermopylae was not enough to stop the Persian invasion, but they saved Sparta's honor and went down in history as the 300 Spartans.